Welcome back to Dating Deja Vu, the podcast where we look at your pitfalls, your patterns, and your personal growth in modern dating. I'm your host, Christina Hathaway, marriage and family therapist and dating and relationship expert. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about why do we date a type? Why are we attracted to certain type of people and understanding the underlying root causes to those attractions. So if your love life has been a bunch of the same over and over again, it might be deja vu, but it also might be you. Let's figure it out together. What's up, Deja crew? Thank you guys. We had our first 2 episodes drop on Groundhog's Day, and I've received some really great feedback from our audience. I even had people say, how do I send this to my girlfriend without looking like an asshole? You simply say, hey, I overheard this, and it made me think of the guy, not her, right? Maybe think of the guy, and she'd be like, oh, well, I need to listen to this. And then you're not saying she's the problem, but you are saying she's the problem. For those new to this podcast, please make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss any episodes or notifications on YouTube if you are watching this on our YouTube page. If you have not already, give us a 5-star rating and review if you like this info. Remember, when you review us, you get this out to more people. The more people who listen to me, the better you will be at in finding a good partner because they'll be exposed to this information too. So see, giving us a review is actually for you. All right. So today we've all said it, right? We have a type, right? Maybe it's the person who's attracted to you. Maybe it's the way a person looks, right? Maybe it's their personality, their vibe, whatever that looks like. For whatever reason, you are pulled towards this type. And it's like that song. I remember I had this whole list, like finance, 6'5", blue eyes, trust fund, right? The whole thing. And the funny thing is that my list of things that I wanted from the guy and what I was actually receiving was completely different. And finally, I had to stop. And I hope in this conversation, you stop and think like, why was I drawn to that type, to that person? And so attraction at times can seem very random, but it's not. It's not random at all. We oftentimes feel like magnetized to people, like we're all like drawn to them like magnets, right? And, you could probably look back and see how even they may look differently. There's a lot of similarities in the people that you dated, and not just in appearance, but in the way you interact, what your needs or lack thereof, how they were being met. And so the reason for that is that our attraction is oftentimes deep-seated in our patterns from our past and mostly from our childhood. Now, again, when we're talking about childhood, this isn't a time to call your parents and tell them how they fucked up your dating life. This is a time to have compassion for them because they did what they can do with what they had, right? And we have to remember that if it's not big T trauma, so direct trauma, and even then I've seen people be very resilient from direct big T, war, incest, rape, death of a parent, but little T trauma. So death by paper cut trauma, as I call it, where it's not necessarily what happened to you, but it's the story you make up about yourself and your worth, more importantly, for what happened to you. So we're going to talk about more of those little T traumas today so you can understand how they affect how you attract. And we're just diving into the psychological behaviors and behind the scenes of a type, whether that's the emotionally unavailable partner, whether that's, the partner who always needs saving. Again, that was me, or the high drama, passionate, withdrawn partner. So the question here today is your type your choice, or is your type shaped from your past? And so we're going to talk about that in detail. So society, we've talked about like our dream guy list, our checklist, there's songs about it. And we tend to say that a type is just like a personal preference, right? So it's looks, shared interests, personal values, things like that. My type back in the day was over 6 feet tall, had to work out, had to be college educated, had to have a career in place, had to love dogs. Of course, that's still on there. What else was on there? Oh, had to dress well. I would like look at a guy's face and then look at his shoes and be like, no, like he could be the hottest guys, but if his shoes were like dirty or they didn't match his outfit, I was out. Like I was so superficial. And what did I end up getting? I got the guys who never went to college that I had to try to get into college that had these random jobs that weren't necessarily careers that they can grow in. I had to teach most of them how to dress. I would buy them clothes. So why was my dream guy on the list, very different from what I was receiving. So I want you guys to understand what was happening in my mind. My subconscious was seeking relationships that mirrored experiences and dynamics that I had before and that I was familiar with. Okay. So even when those dynamics are not necessarily healthy, my brain is saying, well, that's familiar. That feels safe. And when I say safe, if you're not watching on YouTube, quotes safe, because when we can predict things, then it feels safer for us. And if the predictable is chaos, the predictable is not having to share emotion. If the predictable is I put this person before myself, before my own needs, then that feels safer to us than the former. So an example is if a person grew up in a chaotic home, right? So we had a parent maybe who was an addict. We had a parent who was very angry and emotionally unstable, then they're going to be consistently drawn to those intense, unpredictable relationships, right? Because their nervous system, their subconscious mind knows that that's their norm. And we have to realize that when when you're a child and you're in that unpredictable environment, you're constantly in fight or flight. So your body gets used to having cortisol, norepinephrine, epinephrine shooting through it. It almost becomes your normal, right? So when you're not feeling that way, we call this emotional addiction. When we're not feeling those heavy, intense feelings, we seek them. So that's what we're going to talk about. So let's break it down on why we keep dating the same people and why we're attracted to them. So why are we attracted to the avoidant type? For you, if you're like, yes, I keep attracting the avoidant type, I want you to ask yourself, did I have a parent who was emotionally inconsistent or unavailable? Okay. Did I have a parent who maybe just wasn't there, right? When I needed that parent, I was crying, I was hurt, they were working, right? They worked, maybe work was their vice. Or they were going through their own mental health struggles, so they couldn't be there for you. Now we have to realize like that is their job. Children do not understand how to regulate their emotions. We co-regulate through our parents. We do that in very early infancy, and then through our environment, continue that co-regulation. So if our parents are not regulated or even there, then we don't learn how to manage our emotions, to have a space to share those emotions. Or if it's inconsistent, that could almost even be worse, where mommy is there sometimes, but then mommy's not. And that could be for a variety of reasons. Again, work, even addiction, right? If mommy's trying to get sober, she's clear-headed, she's there for me. But when mommy's drinking, she's not. So you then become attracted to the distance, right? The reluctance in relationship. And anytime you get any sort of snippet that love is being earned, that you did something good, that reward is even more intense, right? Because you're recreating this validation and need from very early on with a lot of wounds and shame and guilt connected to it through this potential partner. The problem is that you're only attracting the partner who mimics what you are familiar with, which is distance. And so that's really important for you to know. Like, wow, like in childhood, I didn't receive that love, connection, and safety. Like when I needed a parent there, whether they were, again, just out working or they were emotionally unstable themselves, I didn't receive it. And my body is attracted to that because it's familiar to me. So I want you guys to think of that familiarity again, of like what the body in that little part of yourself felt, right? So when I get emotional, I am used to being disappointed. I am used to having to deal with my emotions on my own. I am used to maybe even changing my emotions to please somebody else. And that part of you is, attracting that person to you because, again, it feels familiar. Now, how do you know, right? We're going to talk about that here at the end. All right. The next one is the fixer or caretaker type, right? So this again was me. And I will actually, let me say this again. You're the fixer. They're the wounded birds, the fixer-uppers, right? Which we've talked about here. Feels drawn to the partners who have emotional baggage, the partners who are addicted or unstable. Again, this was me. My mom went through a pretty deep, what I would call depression now as a therapist with over 15 years experience at this point. she had a depression. She had a lot of grief and loss within a very small period of time. And on top of that, she lost her father because he was a terrible human after all those things happened. And she was emotionally unavailable to me. And I oftentimes would perform because I knew it made her happy. Now, I didn't know that in childhood. I just knew that she was happy. And I got a sense of like positivity out of it. Now, I think about it as like, it was a lot. That's a lot to put on a kid, you know? And while performing came easy for me, it still was a lot to put on me because then when I needed her and I needed to express myself, she wasn't there. So we can see then too how I could be attracted to that emotionally unavailable person. But if we grew up in a home again where your value is tied to taking care of others, right? Emotionally or physically. So it could be an emotionally distant parent, a parent with addiction, or say that you're the oldest of a very large family. You could have been put in a parentified child role where you were actually put in charge of the other children. Now, the problem with that is that you were not equipped to take care of your siblings. You are a child yourself. You are going to make mistakes. You don't have the skills. Like that'd be like someone be like, here, build this house and you have a screwdriver, right? And then scolding you for it or shaming you for it, or worse, withholding love from it, right? And so like for me, I remember if I was having emotion, my mom would almost give me the silent treatment sometimes. That's to me, her withholding love. So what did that cause me to do? Perform more, take care of her more, kind of appease her. I would do these like dramatic, I'm so sorry, you were right. Really trying to like stroke her ego as a kid, right? That's unnecessary, but that's what I learned I needed to do. And so people who are attracted to the wounded birds or the fixer-uppers, we seek relationships where we feel needed, right? Our identity is we take care of people. That's how we receive love, right? And that love and caretaking becomes so intertwined, making you believe that you have to fix someone in order to receive that love and that connection. So for you, I want you to really look at like, again, like I talked about all the different changes I made. And in my brain, I was like patting myself on the back. Like, look at how great you are taking care of all these grown ass men. Right. It wasn't until I, kind of hit rock bottom myself that I realized, oh shit, that was a problem. All right. Next one is the chaos conductor, intense, unstable relationship, the person that seeks drama, the passion addict, right? The toxic twin flame, as I have in here on my notes. And we mistake high emotional intensity for love, which is something we've already talked about. And relationships are often passionate, but volatile. I see this on not social media. I see this on reality TV often, where it's just like this crazy intense relationship. I've seen it in real life where it's just constantly chaotic, and chaos becomes our addiction. So if you're someone who is attracted to this type, your body has been acclimated to feeling chaos, the stress hormones, cortisol, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. Your body that's almost like your homeostasis. It's almost like your baseline, because you've been conditioned over time to feel that way, right? It's like the dog with the bell, but yours is love is chaotic because we've seen it over and over and over again. You may have been in a domestically violent relationship or witnessed that with your own family. Your family could just be loud and dramatic. I see that a lot with like Italian families, Hispanic families. I'm half Italian, half Hispanic. And it's just very loud and crazy and chaotic and dramatic. And your body becomes, again, accustomed to that. So then when you're in a parasympathetic place, which is actually your, what we call your rest and digest, is when our body is out of fight, flight, freeze, or please, that feels boring. So you actually are attracted to chaos. And here's the shitty thing. If you do get a healthy, calm partner, you're going to think they're boring. And this is something I was talking to an Uber driver this week, and she kept telling me like this chaotic relationship felt so vibrant and alive, and these other guys just felt boring. And I told her, well, boring's the new green flag, which is going to be one of our next episodes. So stay tuned for that. So again, your body is seeking that stress hormone. And for those of you who don't know, I have a second podcast. It's actually my first podcast called Mindset Mirror Connection, where I talk about all of this and how it affects your body. We talk about nutrition, health, fitness, and your relationship with yourself and how it affects that. So if you want to check out some of those episodes, we talk all about how stress hormones affect the body. But then we get into a relationship, and the first sign that that person is chaotic feels calming. Okay. So in the first one, the first sign that person feels distance feels calming, feels familiar. This one is when they feel chaotic, it feels calming, right? So that could be on the first date. This happened to me. On the first date, this person got super duper drunk and then asked me to drive him to Old Town Scottsdale so he can go out and hang out with his friends. And I was like, okay. And then long story short, we ended up being friends because we were better friends than anything else. But like, just even getting an argument on your first date, some women will be attracted to that because they're attracted to the chaos. All right. Next one is the critic, the controlling critical type. Okay. This is the person who overcorrects. This is a person who kind of walks in as like daddy, not hot daddy, not zaddy, just that like father behavior. And they're very controlling. Now, initially, you might see them control the situation, belittle people, right? But then they'll start doing that to you, making the partner feel like they're always falling short. Now, when you're dating, again, look at how people treat service employees, the waitress, the valet, right? The person at Starbucks. Listen to how they speak about their partners, right? Because you're going to understand pretty quickly that they're controlling, that they're this critical type. Control too can definitely creep up on you, but control is when, you feel like your autonomy is being taken away. They're making choices, and it'll sound like the choices they're making are for you to like please them, right? Like, oh, you should dress this way because it makes me happy. So be very cautious of that. One thing I like to teach people, which is off topic, is like, pleasing your partner is wonderful until it becomes at the expense of yourself. And self is what I want, right? So if you're dressing in a way, I think of like Kanye and his chick on the red carpet at the Grammys where she's fully naked. She's a nude. Now, I don't know her, but she seems so controlled. And knowing him and like his whole personality, he's this critic type, and she probably just does as he says. She's probably pretty brainwashed by him and the thought of being his wife. But that's another topic that we can talk about that in Deja Vu. So if you had a highly critical parent, right, or a caregiver who made love feel conditional, okay, you may seek out partners who make you feel like you have to earn affection. So a highly critical parent could be a parent who puts a lot of emphasis on how other people look at us. A parent who you get an A- and it should have been an A+. A parent who, oh, why can't you be like so-and-so, the other child, another, friend's kid. A parent who's very critical of mistakes, spilling milk. I always use this example. Kids spill shit all the time. It's part of their clumsiness, right? We don't shame them for that. We teach them, right? Instead of shaming, we need to give them skills, right? And so the other part of that though, too, is conditional love. Like, daddy only loves me if I do well in sports. Daddy only loves me if I get straight A's. Daddy only loves me if I'm, a pretty girl or skinny or whatever. Mommy only loves me when I'm skinny. She makes fun of me when my weight's up, which I've seen that because, again, I have two companies. My company, The Mindset of Matter, is all on how this underlying stuff affects our relationship with our bodies and food. And so this dynamic reinforces the deep-seated beliefs about not being good enough, right? And we then turn to receive external validation, which then that critic, maybe they get little bits of it, but that critic again feels calming. It feels familiar. I guarantee you, if you did have someone who allowed you to be yourself, gave you open space to be seen and heard, that would actually feel uncomfortable to you. Just like with the emotionally unavailable person, when they're attracted to that, if someone gave them space to be open, to be vulnerable without judgment, that's going to feel very uncomfortable, right? And that's where we hear these situations, he's too nice, it's boring, things like that. But what really it is, it's you, right? It's your discomfort with being around even a healthy person, right? And until you do your own work on this, then that's going to continue to feel uncomfortable. Number 5 is not one I see often, but I wanted to throw it in here, which is the fantasy chaser, right? So this is like the person who is always in a relationship with someone long distance, the emotionally unavailable addict. I see this a lot now that I'm saying it out loud. I have a lot of girlfriends like this, not necessarily women in my coaching practice, but they fall for unavailable people who are emotionally distant, right? Where we still have this kind of, I shouldn't say emotionally distant, physically distant, where you can have this kind of emotional relationship, but within your own boundaries, right? Because they don't live here. They don't kind of invade your time. You can get what you want out of them, but then leave what you don't want. This is also what we call situationships, right? Being like a situationship addict, like never really committing to someone. And sometimes you'll be like, I don't understand why I get in situationships all of the time, right? But you're falling for unavailable people, the emotional distant partner, the physically distant partner, right? And if you had, again, a parent who is physically or emotionally distant, you may be conditioned to equate longing with love, like needing someone there with love. Chasing the unattainable can make love feel more meaningful, reinforcing the idea that love should be difficult to be real. So I see this often where, and you're probably thinking, okay, the emotionally distant, like the avoidant person. So that's emotionally avoidant. But in this fantasy chaser, it's like we're playing house, but like in a bubble, where they're not necessarily there, or we kind of do things like a couple, but we're not emotionally a couple. Or again, that long distance relationship. I think Paige and Craig on Summer House, like they only had and they're celebrities. So like they have more availability than your day-to-day person, but we only have so much time to dedicate to that person. Right. And again, if you didn't have a parent, or maybe you're an only child, even that would be a really big one on here. Only children to me are people who are often attracted to this because they've always had their own space. They've always had their own time. They haven't had to share with other people. Right. But then we have the emotionally unavailable or physically unavailable parent, excuse me. And so that is, again, like I only have a relationship with my dad who travels all the time. I only see him 1 to 2 times a week. If that, I see him through phone calls or FaceTime or text messages. And you learn that like, that's how love and connection feels to you. It feels very distant. Right. And, up front, if we have, and this is repeating something already, but we have an emotionally unavailable parent, right? Love feels disconnected. It feels distant from you. And so, as you guys can hear, there's oftentimes a lot of the same upbringing patterns that can actually veer off into attracting different types. Every person is going to be different, but that only child part of it is a big one for me. It's like, I have my toys. I want to play with my toys on my time, and I will only allow you to play with my toys when I say so. And so we are attracted to that guy out of town. We're attracted to that person who works all the time. We're attracted to that situationship. So, all right, how to break the cycle. You're probably like, fuck. First things first is awareness is key. And that's why you're here at Dating Deja Vu. You cannot change a pattern if you don't understand it or recognize it. So hopefully you've taken some of the things that I've talked about today and been like, okay, write it down. Write down the last 5 relationships. What were their similarities? What were the things? How did it end? How did they treat you? How did you feel in that relationship? And how did all of that feel familiar? What is your earliest experience of feeling that? That's going to bring you to, okay, I have attracted myself to emotionally unavailable people or wounded people or critical people. I'm aware of that now. And I want you to identify the core emotional need that keeps you stuck. So I'm going to talk about that in a second. So again, what are the common themes, right? Why do I keep choosing this partner? Does the dynamic make me feel secure, or does the dynamic make me feel just comfortable or familiar? Security is what it sounds like. We're not questioning things. We're not manipulating. We're not doing this text bullshit like, well, he didn't text me at this time, so I'm going to text him again. No, we're just living our lives and having a relationship while doing it. Okay. There's no validation needed. We want this person. We don't need this person. Whereas familiar is I need to show up as my best self. I need to take care of this person. Oh, he said he was quitting smoking. So I'm going to make him a basket of all these things that he needs to quit smoking, even though he didn't ask for my help. But for me as a people pleaser, I'm going to go ahead and do that. That's something I did. And then, is it familiar, right? So chaos is familiar to me. I had an abusive brother, not me. I did not. My brother is amazing. I had an abusive sibling or a sibling. Here's the thing, guys, for that chaotic type of household, sibling with their own mental health issues or even physical issues. I have clients who've had disabled siblings, and that can be very chaotic. For even medical issues, that can be very chaotic in a family. And again, the family can't help that, right? But that can create a lot of chaos. So is it secure? So without the need for validation, you are 100% yourself without needing to change it. Or is it familiar or comfortable? And is the person challenging me to grow or just reinforcing past patterns? Love this. So when we're talking about growth, I think of this particular thing early on in my relationship with my husband, specifically when we moved in together. So we moved in together roughly almost 2 years of dating. We got engaged around 2 years of being together. And so we lived together around a year and a half. And I used to do this like passive aggressive huffing and puffing, something I saw my mom do all the time. And what I was trying to get was a reaction from him, because again, that's what I learned. That's how I knew to get a reaction from my partner, because that's what I was mirrored, or that's what I saw in my own family. And he literally was like, no, he didn't even bite. And what that do, that made me had to grow. Right. And luckily I had done my own healing at that time. So I knew like, you're being ridiculous. If I didn't do my healing, then I would have like picked at him until he broke. But again, I probably wouldn't have gotten into this long-term relationship with someone so healthy if I hadn't done my own work. So keep that in mind. But he wouldn't even bite. And so finally I was like, okay, you can't do that anymore. Like it doesn't work here. So he helped me grow. Right. Whereas again, if he would have come at me or been like, what is your fucking problem? Or things that I had experienced in the past, and he's only reinforcing past behaviors and codependency, and me not sharing directly what I need, but doing it passive aggressively and with this kind of like tantrum way. Now, I'm not going to lie. I kind of had a tantrum this morning. It was more a tantrum with myself because I lost my fucking AirPods. I could not find them anywhere. And I was just like, this morning's ruined. I hate when I get in that place because it's so few far in between these days, but like, I'm not going to lie, it happens. And then my brain is like, do not take it out on Mark. And then, okay, so just to go over that again, create awareness. That's why you're listening to this. Identify the core emotional needs that keep you stuck, right? So I did say I would come back to that. So I'm glad I reviewed it. So the core emotional needs of every human, there are 6. So we have love and connection, safety, autonomy, growth, variety, and identity. Okay. So love and connection, having connection to other humans, to be social, to feel loved. Safety, kids are boundaryless. They cannot defend for themselves. So making sure we feel safe, making sure we're safe emotionally, physically, mentally. Identity, being able to be ourselves, create who we are in ourselves, not feel like we have to be different in front of other people or that people expect us to be a certain way. We can create that identity, and the autonomy to do that, the autonomy to make our own choices, the autonomy to share, and respect other people's autonomy as well. Growth, being able to grow and heal and develop and not be stuck in certain situations. A lot of times when people experience trauma, they get stuck. That growth, that need doesn't happen. As you guys can hear, like your emotional maturity ends when that parent or that, when those things happen, you get stuck in those times of your life. Right. And then variety, like being able to try different things and take on challenges and, just have different like experiences in life. Now, in some families, things are very rigid. Like I've worked with a few women in like the Orthodox Jewish community where things are very rigid. There is not a lot of variety there. And these particular women have left the community, and they are just, that variety piece feels so overwhelming for them. So we need to identify the core emotional need that keeps coming up. So again, is it love and connection, safety and security, identity, right? Autonomy, growth, variety, Even just like, am I trying to get validated, which is more identity, right? Am I trying to validate that I'm enough, right? Ask yourself the common theme in the partners, as we already talked about. Does the dynamic make me feel secure, or does it make me feel comfortable and familiar? Is the person challenging me to grow, or just reinforcing my past patterns? Then we want to redefine attraction, learning to separate what feels familiar from what is actually healthy. Now, I want you guys to stay tuned because we're going to talk about boring is the new green flag. And that probably sounds like, what? Just listen, because if toxic has been your green flag forever, then boring is going to feel very different than that. But what we want to do is learn to separate what feels familiar from what is actually healthy. Healthy relationships support all 6 of those needs. They support love, true love and connection that's unconditional. There's no earning of love. There are boundaries. So there's safety, right? Safety physically, safety emotionally, sexually, mentally. Boundaries with your time, boundaries with your intellect, right? Where we all can share. I think of boundaries as a door, right? We can, for a lot of people, they slam the door and have 17 locks. For other people, that door is wide open. But there's actually an in between. We can have a screen door. We can have a little peephole. We can have a screen door with an open door, right? An open main door. And we can kind of decide where we're at in all aspects of boundaries. So physical, emotional, sexual, spiritual, cognitive. That's safety, right? When we talk about autonomy, like you're separate from your relationship. Like I am Christina, he is Mark. We're the Hathaways together, right? And oftentimes people do associate with us with each other, obviously, because we're together all the time. Like, but if I want to go do something on my own, I can. Like, it's not, I have to be, with him, nor do I have to act a certain way, look a certain way. I am just me. Like, he's never tried to change me. I've had the autonomy, which also goes into identity, right? Like, I know who I am. He allows me to be who I am. I am someone who is a bleeding heart. He doesn't get it, but that doesn't mean that he shames me for it, guilts me for it. He just is accepting, and he loves me for that too, because again, that's something that he doesn't necessarily feel, but I also am not like him. I'm not very like super logical and like have attention to detail. I can have attention to detail, but it's usually with something creative, where he can have attention to detail to something where my brain goes, right? So is it familiar or is it healthy? And I'm going to give you some practical exercises. So journaling prompts, like what does a healthy relationship look like for me? Some of the greatest books I can direct you guys, one of the greatest books I should say, is How to Do the Work or How to Be the Love You Seek by Dr. Nicole LaPera. She and I have almost identical perceptions on relationships and how they work. Another person I like to follow is Dr. Gabor Mate, but he's more around the physiological aspects of trauma. I love Dick Schwartz because he helps you understand the different parts of you and how they all play in together. But Dr. Nicole LaPera, holistic psychologist on Instagram, definitely a good follow. So what does a healthy relationship look like for me? Another exercise is reframing. We use this in the Mindset of Matter all the time. I use this in my coaching business as well. If stability feels boring, then why? When I get critical, get curious. When I get critical, get curious, right? Am I criticizing myself in this relationship? Why? Why does boring feel unfamiliar to me? Why am I constantly picking at fights? Why do I feel like I can't say no to this person? Then we're going to use, as we talked about last time, facts versus fantasy. What are the facts, right? Well, I'm making up stories in my head that they want me to do this. That is a fact. That's what's happening. They haven't actually asked me to do the things that I continue to do, but then I feel like they're not appreciating the things that I do, even though they didn't ask me, so on and so forth. Okay. And then conscious dating, choosing partners based on shared values, not just chemistry. So Mark and I's first date, I thought it was super boring and vanilla until we started talking about music. And I was like, oh, we love the same type of music. Like, okay, I can go on with him because he felt boring and vanilla. But at the time I knew that boring and vanilla was exactly what I needed. So just a reminder, guys, attraction isn't random. It's often shaped by our past experiences. If you keep dating the same type and end up in the same relationships, you need to ask yourself, is my type helping me grow or keeping me stuck? Challenge yourself and reflect. Do you actually like the person that you're with? Or do you like the emotional dynamic that is related to them? And again, pay attention to those next episodes as we're going to get layers and layers deeper into this. We're going to talk about why boring is the new green flag. We are going to talk about how to get over your toxic ex. We're going to talk about red flags and green flags in general, and so much more. So do not forget. Thank you guys for tuning into this episode. I'd love to hear feedback in the comments. Again, Please make sure you are following us wherever you listen to your podcast, or if you're a YouTube king or queen, please make sure that you are subscribed to our channel. You can follow me on Instagram at Dating Deja Vu Podcast. And I hope you figured out a few things about yourself today, because remember, it might be deja vu, but it also might be you.